Okay, so this is sort of a comment response video, although I won't be sharing the comments. But I wanted to talk about this because it was an exchange that I've had, well, a couple of exchanges that I've had that were very similar recently, and they were really important. And I'll talk about why. I'm not going to share the context because it really doesn't matter, but basically what ended up happening was I received two sort of critical comments on my beauty channel because of verbiage that I used in two separate videos. And what ended up happening was I responded curiously. Rather than getting defensive or, attacking them or brushing it off, I specifically commented back saying, I don't understand this thing. Can you explain it to me? Like, let's have a conversation about it. Now, the reason that that's different, I think, is because there were other people who commented on those separate, criticisms, brushing it off and saying, basically accusing those people of like, oh, everyone's just looking for something to be offended by. Hopefully that gives you enough information. And the reason that I'm bringing this up is because I thought it was very interesting, like how differently it could have gone. Because with both of these situations, when I responded saying, either I did the research, thank you for bringing this to my attention, I did the research and you're right, and I've learned something that I literally didn't know or consider, or maybe subconsciously like sort of knew, but wasn't, like, because it was subconscious, I wasn't paying attention to it. Or it was something that like I literally never heard of, and now I know something different. And it's made this tiny little change in how I view things, and it's made me a tiny bit more aware and more knowledgeable. On those two criticisms, the other people who responded and were like, oh, this person's just looking for something to complain about or bitch about or be offended by or whatever. I was so interested in those responses because it's so easy. It's very easy to go through life and receive a criticism or a comment and have this like, it's all bullshit attitude. Dude, fuck this person. This isn't worth my time. So like, I'm gonna put them down and then move on with my life. That's an incredibly easy thing. What's more difficult is taking a beat, thinking that I could potentially be like wrong about something and someone else has something to offer. And when I say it out loud, it sounds so obvious, but it's such a difficult thing because especially on the internet, like I think the written word, it just doesn't translate the way speaking does, right? So you don't necessarily get the correct tone of someone's comment. This is one of the reasons that like emojis help, is it helps to kind of like set the tone, You just get like a better illustration, I guess, of their intentions, of how they're trying to like say these words. So it's easy to just read something and be like, this person's an asshole because they're criticizing me. And it does take a lot to be like, oh, hold on, they might have something to offer. And it was just funny because when I read those response comments of the people who were just basically like, this is bullshit, I was like, I ended up having a very pleasant and also productive dialogue with these people who left critical comments on my beauty channel. It went well. Like there was no animosity. No one was a dick. When I asked, like one person in particular, when I asked them and I said, I don't understand where you're coming from, can you explain? They were more than happy to have a conversation with me and explain their point of view. And because they were so, kind with their response, I was like, this is a good dialogue. This is a pleasant conversation. We got somewhere, But if I hadn't had that attitude, if I hadn't had that outlook going into it, if I just said, immediately got defensive and was like, fuck these people, they're just trying to attack me, haters or whatever, that wouldn't have happened. And two people would not have, gotten anywhere. There wouldn't have been a productive conversation. I wouldn't know the things that I know now, and I would just be more closed off. And this is one of the reasons that, like, I really rejected the term haters or hate when it became more widely used on the internet, because it felt like all of a sudden it was being used to describe everything, any kind of criticism. Oh, well, they're just a hater. They're just hating. And I was like, no. Like, a hate comment is something that, like, is like, go die and get, like, I hope you get cancer and die. That's a hate comment. That is like, that's hate. That's hateful. Someone like genuinely, even if they're just being like, even if their tone is kind of like dickish, but if they're giving you a valid criticism, that's called criticism, not hate. And I think that's a really important thing to remember, because it became very popular to just be like, any negativity that I'm receiving, anything I view as a negative, is hate and not criticism. It's not worth my time. It's not worth me reflecting and looking at. And I think that's fucked up. So when I first started, like, I would, personally, when I receive negative comments, sometimes they're just incredibly entertaining to me. I'm actually thinking about doing a video where I read a bunch of negative comments and kind of like either share my responses or we respond to it together, because, like, so entertaining. Some of them are so crazy. But anyway, but I think that this is like something that has been translating from the internet into real life, and it's very dangerous. I think it's a very dangerous thing not to recognize your own fault, not faults, but like places where you might not be complete, you might not know everything, which, like, everybody doesn't know everything. We're always learning. That never ends. Doesn't matter how old you are, doesn't matter how much experience you have, you don't know everything. You might be better equipped than others, but the other person might still be able to teach you something more than likely than not. What was I talking about? Oh, that it's like encroaching into real life. I just think that this, like, mentality, it started on the internet and became, like, more popular on the internet, this idea of, like, haters and hate. And I'm worried that it's kind of like become a thing that people don't value criticism. This is so random, but, like, when I was in school, so I went to school for painting, right? Critiques were like a weekly thing where at the end, like the end of, I think it was like weekly, but like we would, or maybe it was like at the, like, maybe it was like quarterly during a project. It doesn't fucking matter. Anyway, we would like sit in a circle with all of our paintings and we would critique other people's work. We would give feedback, whether it was negative, positive, basically anything that you wanted to share. Obviously the professor would be like weighing in. That's an important thing, especially in art, because people see things differently. Wow, I feel like light bulb, hello, people see things differently. Shouldn't be shocking. And it used to really bother me when the professor would be talking to a student and giving their critique, and the student would be talking over them and being like, yeah, well, that part isn't finished, or like, yeah, well, I'm gonna go in this direction. And I used to be like, shut the fuck up. Let the professors finish their sentence. Whether that was part of your plan or not, don't, like, interrupt them. Like, the reason that you're in this class is to have this person teach you. Anyway, such a random rant, but, like, very passionate about that. It used to bother me. So I used to, like, physically hurt when I would be, like, sitting in a class and that would be happening. Like, just stop. What are you doing? It's embarrassing. Anyway, I realized that I didn't, like, give you the exact situations just because it's unnecessary. I don't want them to, because I think as soon as you know the exact situation, what was said, what, like, the critique of me, and I mean, like, it's obviously it's on my YouTube channel, so, like, you could find it. It's not like it's a private thing or anything, but for the purposes of this video, it's very difficult for people to put their biases aside. And that is obviously, like, a big part of it, is that, like, people are kind of, like, attached to their beliefs. And as soon as you feel like someone is encroaching on that, or not encroaching, but criticizing it, because it's become so much a part of your identity, you get super defensive. And you kind of, like, as a defense mechanism, you're like, they're not in my camp, so, like, they're wrong immediately. I'm not open. I'm, like, closing. This is, like, scary. I don't want to have to, like, consider that I could potentially be wrong. I think that happens a lot today. And that's why I didn't want to give you the exact scenario, because I kind of feel like if I had told what was said, a lot of people would probably immediately like decide what that other person's intentions were. Which is what happened with the people who like responded and were like, oh, they're just trying to be offended. You're basically like assuming you're literally summing up that person and like where they're going with this comment, or who they are in general. You're just summing them up based on this one sentence or a paragraph, which is like so similar, basically the same as walking down the street and seeing someone and sizing them up and deciding who they are, what the decisions they make are, whether or not they're good or bad, just by looking at them, which is human nature. I think it just happens. But we're intellectuals. We got brains. And as we get older, I think you learn to get out of that a little bit and maybe be a little bit more open. At least you should, because to be completely closed off and think that you know everything isn't doing anyone any favors. Great talk.